rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
When you're online, Rogers TV on YouTube shares news and events from your community, like messages from local leaders, updates on the latest health news, local business presenting their new offerings, and how our local communities are working their way through these unprecedented times. Visit and subscribe to Rogers TV on YouTube for the latest local information.
This is Rogers TV.
Hello and welcome to this special edition COVID-19 Rogers television program dedicated to providing you with the information you need about our community response to COVID-19. My name is Carol Merton, and before I welcome our first guest, the producer has sent me some information about an exciting new initiative that I'd like to read to you because I think it demonstrates the way that all members of our community work together to try and help each other. So this new initiative that I received has to do with Blue Jays, yes, the baseball team, and Rogers TV. Rogers and Jays Care Foundation, Step Up to the Plate, has a new initiative for Food Banks Canada with 8 million meals at the Rogers Centre. So the home of the Blue Jays is set to become the temporary home to 10 million pounds of food, as Rogers and Jays Care Foundation support Food Banks Canada with the new initiative, Step Up to the Plate. With food banks continuing to battle food donation shortages and significant drops in volunteers, Rogers Centre will house 6,000 pallets of food that will be sorted into food hampers on the field and delivered across the country to families in need. Each hamper will be filled with a variety of non-perishable food items, providing one individual with a week's worth of food. Hundreds of Rogers employees and their families will be volunteering to stuff the food hampers as part of Rogers' annual Give Together volunteer program, with hundreds more Rogers employees across the country volunteering as the food hampers make their way to local food banks throughout Canada. The company will also be tapping its personalized mobile retail team, Rogers Pro on the Go, to help make deliveries on the ground. The goal is to fill 390,000 hampers for a total of 8 million meals. Step Up to the Plate is an extension of Rogers' initiative in March, in which the company launched a national awareness and fundraising campaign for Food Banks Canada through its media assets. Rogers is focused on supporting the most vulnerable through this pandemic and beyond, as COVID-19's economic impacts are expected to last for quite some time after the lifting of current restrictions. We are all in this together, and as a community, we can continue to care for and to support each other. And on that note, I am delighted to welcome our guest today, Stuart Reid, who is the Executive Director, Community Foundation of Grey Bruce, who's going to tell us more about community initiatives and opportunities, particularly in relation to the Emergency Community Support Fund. Stuart, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking time to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Carol. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. I'm wondering first if you'd mind just discussing a little bit about the Community Foundation, just to give people who may not be as familiar with it a background about it, and then if you wouldn't mind sharing how the Community Foundation is helping through this COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, I'd be happy to. So Community Foundation Grey Bruce is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. So it was established in 1994 by a group of individuals who came together that recognized the impact of the model of Community Foundation. What we do is we accept donations from individuals and organizations and groups in the community, and we endow money, and we use the proceeds from those endowments. So the endowments are invested in the global marketplace, and the money we make on the endowments, we grant back to the community in the form of grants to charities and not-for-profits across the region. And that way we support ongoing issues around community well-being and community impact. So in terms of scale and impact, in 2018, for example, we granted back over $726,000 to groups across the region to support all aspects of community life, everything from arts and culture to sports and recreation, the environment, children's issues, food security, health and well-being, any kind of social service as well is eligible. So we really have a broad influence in terms of those dollars that we're able to reinvest back into community in partnership with our fund holders and donors. So really interesting model. We also are very active in kind of taking the pulse of community well-being. Yeah. And we have a program that we participate in called Vital Signs, which is shared by community foundations across Canada and around the world. And it's a little bit of a community report card, which looks at statistical data on community health, and we translate that into a very accessible, readable format that is circulated in a report every couple of years to tell people how we're doing. And that's another way that we learn about community need, and that helps us in our conversations with funders and donors, but also in our strategic grant making too, trying to make sure that the dollars that we're sending out to the community are addressing the greatest need as those needs arise.
So you're describing a process where the Community Foundation of Grey Bruce helps to determine through the community input what the needs are for Grey Bruce. So it's very much one size doesn't necessarily fit all.
That's really true. And, we're a unique part of Ontario. And, we have one major city, that being Owen Sound, and a large rural area with a lot of smaller population centers. We also, our neighbors encompass 2 First Nations communities as well at Saugeen and Neoshiniming. So that again makes us quite unique in terms of the landscape of Ontario. We try and make sure that we're looking locally, and we use local knowledge for local impact, and that's what we're all about.
That needs to be on a business card, that last statement you had. That's amazing. To prepare for this interview, I was just reading some information, and what really captured me is the vision of the Community Foundation is that everyone in Grey Bruce benefits from a vital, healthy, and resilient community. And in COVID-19, we're really talking about resiliency. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing about the funding and the what's available in response to COVID-19 for our community.
Sure, Carol. I think it's top of mind right now, the impacts of what's been happening the last, we're into the 3rd month of the pandemic. And very recently, the Community Foundation did a survey of charities and not-for-profits across the region to find out, what the impacts are on a lot of the organizations that are serving people in terms of how they're coping with closures and with the restrictions on public gatherings, all of the aspects of the pandemic. And we got some really interesting results. If people are interested in digging in a little bit deeper, they are posted on our website at communityfoundationgraybruce.com. We heard back from 82 different agencies, so a really robust response to our to our call out. And those agencies were from right across the region. 28 of them served Grey and Bruce counties together. There were 11 agencies responded from Owen Sound. And then we heard from people all over the region, from Hanover, North Bruce, Kincardine, Huron-Kinloss, all the smaller centers as well. So we feel we got a really good picture of what's going on. It was interesting to note that over 60% of the people that responded, or the organizations that responded, are registered charities. So it gives us a sense of who we're talking to. We found out that most of them, 54 of the 82, or over 80, about 85%, have less than 10 employees. So we're talking about smaller organizations. We also learned that the great majority of them, about 37%, have volunteers numbering between 20 and 50 supporting their work too. And 100% of the people of the organizations that responded are engaged with volunteers. So our charitable work in Grey Bruce is really supported with grassroots people getting involved, getting their hands dirty and jumping right in. Volunteers are the backbone of what's happening out there. We also asked what sort of function the organizations were engaged in. And arts and culture was the largest responsive group with 24 out of the 82. And that was followed closely thereby with health and wellness. And then we had quite a smattering of different responses from types of organizations, youth and children, the well-being of youth and children being one, recreation and sports, education and lifelong learning. All the social services were about 10 or 11% each. So that was pretty interesting too.
Yeah.
In the survey, we also asked what were the impacts that COVID was having on their organization. And overall, we heard about their closures, and 49 of those respondents, about 60%, are closed presently. And it was also interesting to hear that some of them have been having a reduced amount of activity, about 14 of the 82, or just under 10%. But some, about the same, are busier and having trouble keeping up with the demand. And we assume that that's probably around food security and some of the agencies that are supporting the meal production. But that was interesting to see as well. The groups anecdotally talked about their fears about a loss of income or jobs. One of the biggest impact was on our local charities was the inability to fundraise because of the restrictions on public events. So a lot of them had fundraising events that had to be canceled, and those fundraising events raise money for operations. So there was a lot of concern about financial difficulties looming, loss of jobs or income were a big thing. Health-related concerns were paramount, particularly mental health issues. And we all know how the pandemic is affecting all of us in terms of isolation and lack of social contact. Communication through the internet, which we're relying on right now, and we have to do our regular business. And sometimes that's a great challenge in rural Ontario with broadband and Wi-Fi access. So that was something we learned about as well. So really a great cross-section of inputs that let us see how people are coping. And as I mentioned, you can look at those results on our website if you'd like to see a little bit more detail on that survey results.
You mentioned a few things that came. Was there anything that really captured you as being unexpected or unique that you thought, gee, I wouldn't have thought of that, or that's a surprise?
Well, I think the anecdotal expression about mental wellness as being so predominant, I know that that's kind of falls outside of a lot of the organization's focus on activities, but it did seem to be something that was right across the sector. And, people are having difficulty coping with some of the impacts of isolation and restrictions on movement. It's a very human thing, isn't it? That, we derive a great deal of our wellness from our interactions with others. And I think that was something for me personally that really resonated in looking at the survey results. And I think the loudest thing we heard about was that fundraising piece and the impact of the lack of events. And that's everybody across the sector, from theater groups and symphonies and art galleries and but down to hikes and golf tournaments, anything where people come together to raise funds and to participate in something together has been curtailed by the pandemic.
We think of infrastructure in so many ways, bridges and roads, but there is a huge community support infrastructure that is present through charities and to support our community, and we're becoming more and more aware of how critical it is for the health and well-being of our community. I think this has been a key learning for a lot of people. You don't know, sometimes you have to almost lose something to recognize how valuable it truly is for our healthy communities. So, how are we going to address some of these issues, Stuart? Where's the money from? Where's the money?
Well, that's a big factor in our activities right now. We are very blessed to be participating in the Emergency Community Support Fund. This is money that's coming to us from the Government of Canada. There's $350 million that's being distributed to communities across the country to assist local charities and not-for-profits who are working with vulnerable populations who are experiencing the impacts of COVID-19. So locally, we are partnering with United Way Bruce Gray, another very vital organization in our community that's very active in terms of addressing community need and health as well. And locally, we have over $500,000 to support agencies, and the applications are now open. There are two portals, so you can either apply to United Way Bruce Gray through unitedwaybrucegray.com, or you can come to the Community Foundation through our website at communityfoundationgraybruce.com. Both websites have information about how to apply. United Way is handling their own application process locally. The Community Foundations of Canada is collaborating on a national portal. I should encourage people to check it out because the gesture is to get money to those that need it very quickly. The application process is not too onerous at all, and organizations shouldn't be intimidated, and they should really look at the application and get their hat in the ring to receive some of this support. You do have to identify which population you are assisting in your work, and there's a roster of questions, of course, and some budgeting and things that support the application. But we're working together with United Way to assess these. We have a joint adjudication panel, and we're meeting weekly to make sure we can respond to the requests in a timely fashion and try and get money out the door as quickly as possible. So that's one big initiative that's happening locally, and we're really grateful for this collaboration and trying to spread the word to organizations that are helping people out to take time to apply, because we have this support available that could be really critical during these extenuating circumstances and the impacts we're facing locally with the COVID-19 pandemic.
So you mentioned that the applications are open now, and will they stay open as long as the funding is available? There's no deadline to this then?
We are aiming to continue to adjudicate the applications until the end of July. So there is a bit of a window. And as I mentioned, it's a rolling deadline. We are assessing on a weekly basis the applications that we receive. So the sooner the better in terms of reaching out and talking to us about your need.
If you don't mind me asking a few more details about the application, Stuart. So is this for, people are applying for a shorter period of time rather than a 2-year program? I know there's different types of granting opportunities, but they could apply for a few months to get funding, or is there
As I mentioned, that it's pretty open, and it can support operational things. Usually, the Community Foundation is focused on project funding. So this is a bit of a departure for us because it does allow for operational support. The money has to be spent by the end of the next federal fiscal, which is March 31st, 2021. So there's a bit of a rolling envelope. In terms of the actual implementation of the project. And I think the program really recognizes that, there's going to be a long recovery shadow for the pandemic as well. And groups are, rallying right now to kind of address what they perceive as community need. And there's going to be, the effort at the moment is to really reach out to those vulnerable populations and make sure we're addressing what people need on the ground at this critical time.
Yeah. So certainly, as you say, encouraging people to look at the applications and to realize, when in doubt, no harm in putting an application forward, right? To just ask for the help. If they had any questions, they could speak to yourself or Francesca Dobbin. Is that correct?
That's correct. And our telephone number is 371-7203, area code 519. And during these times, I'm often the only person in the office. I come in because I don't have good Wi-Fi bandwidth at my home, but my staff are all busy as well, but working remotely. But somebody will return your call as promptly as possible.
Excellent. So certainly a wonderful opportunity to help organizations serve those that are most vulnerable. What else can you tell us about the foundation and how things are working currently? Because is the regular granting process still going on? Like what's happening with this?
Yes, we did shift our spring granting deadline from March 15th to June the 15th. So there is an opportunity for regular project grants, and applications are open now, as I mentioned. So we've got another couple of weeks before the deadline. And we are going to be administering grants over the summer to assist with projects. There'll be another intake for community grants on September the 15th. And at present, we're also accepting, actually the deadline's June 1st for letters of expression of interest for capital funding as well. So there may be some capital dollars rolling out to this year. And, we're trying to operate business as usual, and we're talking with donors and funders and responding to interests in helping out. And we're very proud of the community effort that goes into making the foundation's resources available to charities and not-for-profits over the course of the year, even in challenging times like this one in 2020.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the strength of the community and being able to pivot. For example, you're plugged in and we're having this conversation instead of us meeting in the Rogers studio to do the interview. So certainly the opportunity to help is still there, just maybe a little more virtual or maybe an extended deadlines, which is great because there's no doubt that the focus has shifted somewhat and people are just struggling to cope with this new world for sure. What would you like the community to know as well? Is there anything that I haven't asked you? I certainly would like to know, you're part of a larger group of foundations, and it would be interesting to know about that, but I can say that if there's something else that you want to share at the moment.
Well, a part of our messaging right now, Carol, is to just get people to think about those charities and not-for-profits which are struggling. And if it is within your capacity to make a donation, we really encourage people to do that. There certainly is there are relief funds that have been started locally. Our United Way has one rolling that can provide immediate relief. The foundation, of course, you can go to our website and scroll through the funds that we manage. If there is one there that piques an interest of yours, you're welcome to make a donation. But also going right to the source and getting in touch with a local charity to see if you can help out. That support is really very much appreciated. And philanthropy as well is not just about money, it's about your time your interest and your support, and getting engaged with some of these amazing agencies and the good work that they do can be very rewarding on so many levels. We learned in our survey how they're all using the power of volunteerism to really make their impact. And so if you have time, perhaps, and during this time you have some extra time to give or to lend to support, I'm sure that there's ways to do that, within keeping the restrictions of the pandemic as well. Our local United Way also put together I think it's called The Do. There's a list, a website where you can go and find out how you can plug in as a volunteer, and that's another great thing to do in times like these, where it's so important that our community network is strong and that we're helping each other out, and we're really assisting with that resilience that you mentioned. That's what we're really counting on, is coming together to be strong and come out of this on the other side.
And that you mentioned about donating, as you say, there's many different ways to donate, and time is certainly a donation. From what I'm hearing from volunteers who aren't able to volunteer for various reasons because of the restrictions, they are missing that opportunity to give their time. So your point is well taken. There are other ways to give and other opportunities for volunteering as well. Stuart, so you're part of a larger group of foundations, correct?
We are. The first foundation in Canada was started in 1906 in Winnipeg, and it really borrows that American model of philanthropy. But the movement has grown and grown over the years. Now we number over 191 that stretch from coast to coast to coast, and it's a very interesting and robust network, and serves. It's estimated that 90% of Canadians are served by a community foundation in their region. So we are really covering the country, and the assets that are managed collectively are quite impressive too. I believe at last count it was over $4.6 billion that's held by community foundations to benefit communities across Canada. So quite a robust economic factor that these organizations deploy. And we come together collectively, and there is an organization called Community Foundations of Canada, which sort of set the strategic direction of the movement. And I find a lot of their messaging very inspiring. And in fact, the mandate talks about, the mission statement of the organization, the Community Foundations of Canada, says that we're relentlessly pursuing a future where no one is left behind. Yeah. And that's a very inspiring statement to think about our work as a movement, 191 strong, working locally to really ensure that no one's left behind, that we're reaching out and finding ways to make sure that everyone experiences that community resilience and community health and well-being that we enjoy in Canada. We're so grateful for our wonderful country and the ways that communities are supported, and that inspires me in my work day to day, is to think about that mandate statement. And I'm really very proud of being part of this network of community foundations as well, at a time where the federal government sees us as a way of reaching out to the grassroots, and that we're a trusted partner in this effort to get dollars out to support those vulnerable populations who are going through so much in these months during the pandemic. It's a vote of confidence in the network, and I think a vote of confidence in our community knowledge and the way that we are leaders in talking about community well-being, and it really means a lot to the foundations right across the country to be part of this movement, to really come together and to help one another out, even in these trying times.
And Stuart, on that note, our time is up. I think that's a wonderful closing, and I want to thank you for being on the program. And thank you to our viewing audience. Take care, stay safe, care for each other.